Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my new channel. I'm here today to talk about a very important subject. I'm here to talk about the Iraq War, what led to the Iraq War, and how it compares to the current investigations by WHO on China's lab leak in Wuhan. So I want to compare the similarities, the words used, and the strategies used by the West, especially the US, and how they went into war with Iraq. So as you can see, Hans Blix was the inspector who was in charge of finding weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. So he's been coming out on a lot of interviews over the last 20 years or so, saying the war was illegal. So I want to kind of take you through some of these articles and just show you what's been said. So the UN's former chief weapons inspector Hans Blix has said his firm view that the Iraq war was illegal. So you can see here, his team had inspected over 500 sites and found no evidence of weapons of mass destruction. So that was what was said, and you can see from other articles he's been coming up with saying allies used poor intelligence ahead of Iraq invasion. Alarm bells should have rung when his staff failed to find no evidence of WMD. And you can see Hans Blix says Iraq war was a terrible mistake and violation of UN Charter. He says invading Iraq was a terrible mistake, violation of UN Charter. And all of these articles, he's saying that, basically Hans Blix has inspected over 500 sites. There was over 1,000 inspectors in Iraq, and they found no evidence of weapons of mass destruction. So, and he also come up saying Iraq destroyed weapons of mass destruction in 1991, Hans Blix. So this article was in July 2010. This was about 7 years after the Iraq war invasion. So I want to also show you this as well. Iraq dumped WMDs years ago. No evidence to link Saddam Hussein with September 11 attack, Bush admits. So I want to talk about Hans Blix, because a lot of these articles are saying, yeah, Iraq had no weapons of mass destruction, but he at the time, before the Iraq invasion, he at the time came up with all these articles. He spoke to the US saying Iraq is not complying, Iraq has inconsistencies with his reports, there is no evidence that Iraq has got weapons, but there is no evidence that it hasn't. So before the Iraq war, you can see here, Blix says, this was before the Iraq war, burden of proof on Iraq to show compliance. And you can see here, Blix told UN Security Council yesterday that Iraq must give what is called convincing documentary or other evidence to show it no longer supported program to develop nuclear, chemical or biological weapons. He told reporters after the briefing that he expected Iraqi authorities to provide more information than they gave in the declarations in the previous UN inspection mission known as UNSCOM. So you can see the wording that he's been using, and it's very similar to the wording that's WHO is using, WHO is using right now. They're saying there's inconsistencies with the report, and this is exactly what the US and its allies are jumping on. Wording like this is basically giving fuel to the fire to all these US media, US people, US government, politicians, whoever you name it. This is the kind of lies and this is the kind of poison that it feeds to all of these people that want a war against China or want a war against Iraq. So you can see, if it did say at the time, before the Iraq war, if it came out and blatantly said there's no weapons of mass destruction, Iraq has fully complied, there would be no war. So all of this stuff that he's been saying, war was illegal in Iraq, there was no weapons of mass destruction, the war in Iraq is down to him. It's probably his guilty conscience that's coming out with it, because if he actually came strong and said, hang on a second guys, there's no weapons of mass destruction. You're going to war illegally at the time. There would, maybe people would think differently before jumping into war with Iraq. It's these kind of wordings he used to the UN, these kind of wordings he used to the US to make the US happy, to make the UN happy, that led to the war. So you can see the wording used by the West when it comes to the coronavirus. UK and US criticize WHO's report and accuse China of withholding data. The US and the UK have sharply criticized the World Health Organization report in the beginnings of the coronavirus pandemic, and accusing China of withholding access. So you can see the very similar language that's being used. So I want to kind of talk about this one. So this is Hans Blix talking to some reporters, and you can see here he says, I think they only need to look around the borders and they should realize the seriousness of the situation, he said in an interview on Monday. The Associated Press news, alluding to the US military build-up in the Persian Gulf and neighbouring Kuwait. So you can see the wording used during the time before the build-up to the Iraq war. The world wants Iraq to disarm peacefully, Blix said, but to do that it must provide documents, allow UN inspectors to interview Iraqi scientists in private, show physical evidence of what facilities and weapons have been destroyed. So you can see, even though they find no evidence, they're still pushing Iraq to try and find this evidence which doesn't exist. And Iraq was, they were peacefully abiding to the requests. They were very, obviously Iraqis didn't want war. They were peacefully doing what they wanted. And at the time they had no weapons, hardly any even normal weapons to even defend themselves. So he says, what the show of force demonstrates to Iraq, that here is other alternative, he said. Blix said the key message that he and Mohammed El-Baradei, chief of atomic energy, will deliver to Iraq officials when they visit Baghdad on Sunday and Monday. Iraq's 12,000-page weapons declaration submitted to inspectors last month did not contain any new evidence to verify its claim its weapons of mass destruction have been destroyed. So can you see the wording he used? At no point he says, at no point he says there's no weapons of mass destruction. So if you look at these articles which came out 10 years later, there's no point coming out 10 years later and saying there's no weapons of mass destruction. He should have said at the time, Iraq is cooperating, the documents look good, and there's no evidence of weapons of mass destruction. But this is the kind of words he used, and it's very similar to the words that the WHO chief is using as well. You can see here. Look, that's a little rat here. Looks like a bloody rat. Probably paid off by the US. You can see here. The WHO wants to do a second investigation. It comes after the WHO's General Director, Tedros, said that there have been premature push to rule out a theory that the Wuhan escaped from a Chinese government lab in Wuhan. Can you see? You're just feeding these conspiracy theories when you come out and say things like that in public. It's exactly the same as what Blix has been saying, and you can see Blix has been saying before the Iraq war, inconsistencies in Iraqi declaration. Iraq's weapons declaration contains inconsistencies and leaves many questions unanswered, Chief UN Inspector Hans Blix says to the Security Council today. And you can see wording like that is what causes war. There's no point coming out 10 years later saying, oh, we didn't find any weapons of mass destruction, when at the time, if he did his job and said the correct words and said the truth, then none of the world would be in war with Iraq. The blood of Iraqi people, the blood of all the deaths, has to fall on Hans Blix. It is also his responsibility. He might be feeling guilty now after 10 years, 20 years, but during that time, the blood of Iraqi kids dying is on his hands. And you can see here, Iraq's weapons declaration contains inconsistencies that leaves many questions unanswered, Chief UN Inspector Hans Blix said. Opportunity was missed in the declaration to give us a lot of evidence and addressing the council in New York. And when he speaks like that, it gives the US more weapons to attack Iraq. It gives the US more excuses. And you can see this report here. This was the British idiot that, was lying in front of the media. And you can see here, his name Jeremy Greenstock, ambassador to the UN. It says, regarding Iraq's weapons declaration papers that were submitted, Hans Blix stated that the documents included were inconsistencies and little new information, leading the US and UK ambassadors to conclude, so this is the word conclude, that Iraq is in material breach of UN resolutions, which gives them the go ahead to go to war, basically. So it's basically Hans Blix wording that he used that pushed these two countries to war, and it's exactly the same wording that's being used by the WHO right now. Evidence was provided by China, and now they're saying, oh, it's a bit too premature, we need to look at it more further, there's inconsistencies, there's lots of questions. Basically it doesn't matter what evidence you give them, what you give them, how much information you give them. These guys, the WHO leader, Hans Blix, whoever at the time, were paid off and were given so much pressure by the US that they were forced not to say the truth. They were forced to kind of come up with stupid comments like this, saying, oh, there's inconsistencies, I'm not sure, there might be weapons, there might not, but they need to provide more evidence. And this basically pushes the countries like US and UK to say Iraq is breached, so that gives them green light to go ahead and attack. And that's what happened. That's exactly what happened. And basically, this is the kind of crap that is happening right now with WHO, and very similar to what happened back then with the UN. And there's no difference, guys. There's absolutely no difference. If WHO had the guts or had the balls to stand up to the US and say, look, you kicked us out when Trump was here, now you pulled us back in, and now you're pushing us to do another investigation, and you're just feeding all these conspiracy theories. We said it's highly unlikely, it came from a lab, so just live with it. And all they have to do is put it to close and say, sorry, there is no evidence that this came out of a lab. It's most likely natural, so let's let the world, work with it together. Let all the scientists come with it together. Let the scientists do their jobs. No, none of that. They're just trying to feed these conspiracy theories. Him basically saying, oh, there's been a premature push to rule out the theory the virus escaped from a Chinese lab. It just shows that this is just being political. There's no science in this whatsoever. No science. And you can see, it's just, it's exactly the same way it's going, and it doesn't matter whether China cooperates with WHO. They'll keep coming back with more questions, and they'll keep coming back with saying, oh, China needs to provide us more access, there's not much answers here, there's a lot of inconsistencies, we need more reports, we need more access, and US is going to keep pushing and pushing and pushing until it finds something, or something is planted. Because when something is like this, is very political, it's not a scientific job anymore. So what I think might happen is they're going to push for a second inspection, and instead of scientists going into these labs, there's going to be intelligence agents, dressed in science uniforms and dressed with white coats, and they're going to say, oh, this is doctor this is doctor that, but they're actually intelligence officers. They're out to either get the intelligence they want or plant evidence and say, yeah, we found it, China's been doing it, China grew in this lab, here's the evidence. That's exactly what's going to happen, because this is not scientific experimentation or scientific research anymore. This is purely to feed the intelligence agencies of the US, and all of these people coming in white labs is just going to be full of intelligence agencies, and it just sounds really dodgy to me, sounds really, really fishy. Anyway, let me know what you guys think, and I'll speak to you in the next video. Don't forget to like, subscribe. If you like my video, when you comment, just check your comment is still existing and YouTube hasn't deleted. If you really like the video, then don't forget to donate. You can donate me, buy me a coffee. My PayPal address is on the description, and you can also join my Patreon. Thank you guys. See you in the next video.